Ma'am, you need to step away from this table, now. Sarah Williams looked up from refilling coffee cups, her volunteer badge catching the harsh cafeteria lighting at Naval Station Norfolk. I'm sorry? She paused, coffee pot steady in her hands. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison pointed at her volunteer shirt with obvious irritation. This is a classified military briefing. Civilians have no business listening to operational discussions. The emergency meeting had been called 15 minutes ago. 3 Navy officers hunched over satellite photos showing nothing but dark ocean where USS Montana should be. 120 sailors. No contact for 6 hours. Sir, she's been cleared for... Commander Thompson started. Thompson? I'm handling this. Morrison's voice carried across the half-empty cafeteria. Ma'am, classified means classified. Young women serving coffee don't need details about submarine emergencies. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward the encrypted phone in her pocket, the device that connected her directly to SEAL Emergency Command. The same phone that had coordinated 3 successful submarine rescues in her 5-year career as the Navy's youngest deep-sea recovery specialist. Colonel, I understand your concern, she said quietly, continuing to wipe the table nearby. That's when her phone rang with the distinctive tone that would expose everything. Morrison had been getting increasingly frustrated with the casual atmosphere at Norfolk. Too many civilians, too many young people who didn't understand military hierarchy. The submarine crisis made it worse. USS Montana, a Virginia-class attack sub, had gone silent during routine patrol. No distress call, no emergency beacon, just gone. We need specialized expertise, Captain Rodriguez was saying, studying sonar readings. Deep water emergency protocols, someone who understands submarine rescue operations. Where's our best submarine recovery specialist? Commander Thompson asked. Morrison gestured dismissively toward Sarah, who was quietly organizing supplies at the coffee station. We're talking about saving 120 lives, not having some college girl serve refreshments during crisis management. What Morrison didn't notice was how Sarah moved. Her efficiency wasn't random. She positioned herself to maintain audio contact with their conversation while appearing to focus on mundane tasks. When Thompson mentioned depth calculations, she paused imperceptibly. When Rodriguez read coordinates, her head tilted slightly, as if processing navigation data. Sir, Thompson said carefully, we should contact Submarine Rescue Command. Get their top specialist here immediately. Already did, Morrison replied. Problem is, their best person is supposedly some young hotshot who's probably never seen real combat. Paper credentials don't mean much when lives are on the line. Sarah continued her work, methodically cleaning and restocking. But Thompson noticed her movements had become more precise, more purposeful, like someone listening to intelligence briefings rather than a volunteer going through routine duties. What's the depth reading? Thompson asked. 400 feet. Well, within recovery range if we act fast, Rodriguez answered. But we need someone who understands emergency ascent procedures, decompression protocols, and submarine structural integrity under pressure. Morrison looked skeptical. And you think some young specialist has that kind of experience? The records show successful rescues in similar conditions, Thompson said. 3 operations, 0 casualties, all in deep water. Sarah's phone rang. The sound cut through military conversation like an alarm. Not a personal ringtone, but the urgent professional signal of encrypted emergency communication. Every officer turned toward the sound. Sarah froze, looking at the device. Ma'am, Morrison called with clear authority. Personal calls are inappropriate during military briefings. Take it outside. Sarah looked at him, then at the phone displaying Submarine Rescue Command, Priority 1. 5 years of training, 3 successful rescue operations, and 120 lives hanging in the balance. Morrison stepped closer. I said outside, now. The phone continued its urgent tone. In the sudden quiet, other personnel in the cafeteria noticed the tension. Sarah Williams looked directly at Lieutenant Colonel Morrison and made her choice. I'm sorry, Colonel, but I need to take this call. If you believe every service member deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or assumed status, type respect below. And tell me where you're watching from. This story hits different when I know who's standing with our military heroes. I read every comment. Ma'am, that was a direct order. Morrison's face flushed red. When a Marine officer gives instruction, you follow it. Period. Sarah's voice carried quiet authority that made Thompson sit straighter. Sir, with respect, this concerns the submarine emergency. How could it possibly... Morrison cut himself off, staring at the young woman in volunteer clothes. You're a civilian serving coffee. What could you know about submarine rescue operations? The phone continued ringing, its encrypted tone indicating escalating priority. Colonel Morrison, Thompson tried, maybe we should... Thompson, stay out of this. Morrison's authority filled the cafeteria. This is exactly what's wrong with military bases today. Civilians who think helping out gives them clearance for classified operations. Sarah looked around, taking in the dozen personnel witnessing this confrontation. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed fascinated by the drama. A few were recording with their phones. Sir, she said quietly, lives are at stake. Lives are at stake, which is why we need real military expertise, not some college volunteer with opinions about submarine rescue. Morrison folded his arms. Ma'am, you have 10 seconds to end that call and return to your duties, or I'll have security escort you off base permanently. The phone rang again. Fourth cycle, indicating emergency status. Rodriguez leaned forward nervously. Colonel, maybe the call is... Rodriguez, the call is irrelevant. We're discussing classified submarine emergency protocols. Civilian volunteers don't participate in military crisis management, regardless of how important they think they are. Sarah held the encrypted device, feeling its weight. The same phone she'd used coordinating recovery operations for USS Hartford in the Atlantic, USS Springfield in the Pacific, USS Alexandria in the Mediterranean. 3 submarines, 360 sailors, 0 casualties. Colonel, she said carefully, before you complete that order, you should know that I don't need to know anything except that you're a civilian volunteer disrupting military operations during a crisis. Morrison stepped closer. Security is being called. You're done here. Thompson noticed Sarah's posture had changed. She stood with unconscious military bearing, weight balanced like someone trained for emergency response. Her voice carried calm confidence of someone accustomed to high-pressure decisions. Sir, Thompson said urgently, what if the call is connected to our submarine rescue specialist? Morrison laughed harshly. Our rescue specialist is some young hotshot who probably learned everything from textbooks. This volunteer learned coffee service. The phone rang a 5th time. Priority emergency escalation. Sarah looked at Morrison, then at the officers studying submarine emergency data they couldn't interpret. Rodriguez was holding sonar readings upside down. Thompson was trying to calculate depth pressure with the wrong formula. These men were skilled at their jobs, but submarine rescue required specialized expertise they didn't possess. 120 sailors were depending on someone taking that call. Colonel Morrison, she said with growing authority, you're right about following orders and respecting hierarchy. Military effectiveness depends on clear command structure and appropriate response to legitimate authority. Morrison nodded with satisfaction. Exactly. Now turn off. But it also depends on leaders understanding full context before exercising authority. Sarah's voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had made life-and-death decisions before. The phone rang a 6th time. Maximum priority alert. Ma'am, you are completely out of line, Morrison said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Something about her bearing, her confidence, didn't match the humble volunteer he'd been dismissing. Colonel, Sarah said quietly, before you have me removed, you might want to know who you're talking to. She answered the phone. Commander Williams. The silence was immediate and total. Every conversation stopped. Kitchen sounds ceased. Even the ventilation system seemed to pause as those 2 words registered throughout the cafeteria. Commander Williams, we have USS Montana at 400 feet. No contact for 7 hours. We need you for emergency rescue coordination immediately. Sarah's entire demeanor transformed. Her voice took on crisp authority of someone accustomed to decisions affecting hundreds of lives. "What's the crew status?" "Unknown, ma'am. Last transmission indicated possible flooding in engine compartment. Emergency ballast systems may be compromised. Timeline for rescue operation? 90 minutes maximum before oxygen levels become critical. We're mobilizing deep-sea rescue vehicles but need your expertise for descent protocols and emergency ascent procedures." While Sarah listened to technical briefing, she observed the transformation around her. Morrison had gone completely still, mouth open in dawning horror. Thompson looked fascinated rather than shocked, as if puzzle pieces were clicking into place. Other officers appeared to be experiencing various stages of disbelief. But Sarah's primary focus was on the crisis 400 feet beneath the Atlantic. "Commander Williams, sonar indicates the submarine is resting at 40-degree angle on the continental shelf. Hull integrity appears intact, but we're seeing pressure anomalies that suggest structural stress." Sarah began pacing behind the coffee station, volunteer clothes now completely at odds with the technical authority in her voice. "What's the descent vehicle status?" "Deep submergence rescue vehicle. Mystic is being prepped, but the crew needs your input on approach vectors and docking procedures. The angle and depth create unique challenges." "Understood. Have Mystic's pilot maintain approach from the northwest to avoid hull stress points. Use minimal thruster pressure during final approach. Submarine hull may be compromised near ballast tanks." Morrison finally found his voice, barely a whisper. "Commander?" Sarah held up one finger, indicating she needed to complete the call. Around the cafeteria, personnel at other tables began realizing something extraordinary was happening. Phones were quietly pulled out. Conversations stopped entirely. "Commander, we're also concerned about rapid ascent protocols if crew evacuation is necessary. The depth and potential decompression issues require specialized expertise. Protocol 7 for emergency ascent. Stage decompression stops at 200 feet, 100 feet, and 50 feet. Maintain constant communication with medical teams for decompression sickness monitoring." "Ma'am, Admiral Richardson is requesting immediate consultation on rescue vehicle deployment. Can you coordinate directly with Deep Sea Rescue Command? Patch me through to Richardson immediately. And get me real-time sonar data from USS Hampton. She should be close enough for detailed underwater surveillance." "Copy, Commander. Admiral Richardson connecting now, and USS Hampton is moving to surveillance position." Sarah's mind raced through rescue scenarios. Submarine rescue operations were among the most complex emergencies in naval service. Every decision could mean the difference between successful recovery and catastrophic loss of life. The phone conversation continued with technical precision that left the listening officers stunned. Sarah was discussing submarine structural engineering, deep-sea pressure dynamics, and emergency life support systems with expertise that clearly came from extensive field experience. "Commander Williams, Admiral Richardson here. We need you coordinating this rescue operation immediately. Your experience with Hartford, Springfield, and Alexandria makes you the only person qualified for this depth and angle combination." Thompson's eyes widened. Those were the 3 successful submarine rescues everyone in submarine service knew about. The operations that had saved 360 lives and established new protocols for deep-water emergency recovery. Morrison stared at Sarah with the expression of someone watching their worldview completely collapse. "Admiral, I'm currently at Norfolk Station. How quickly can you get me transportation to Rescue Coordination Center? Helicopter is being dispatched to your location. ETA 12 minutes. Sarah nodded, still processing the technical requirements of the rescue operation while simultaneously dealing with the shocked silence surrounding her in the cafeteria. "Thank you, Admiral. I'll coordinate with Mystic's crew during transport and establish communication protocols with USS Montana if contact is re-established." She ended the call and looked around the completely silent cafeteria. "Colonel Morrison," Sarah said quietly, "I believe you had concerns about civilian volunteers and their understanding of submarine rescue operations." Morrison opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sarah removed her volunteer badge, setting it carefully on the table. Underneath her civilian polo shirt, a thin chain was visible, the kind that held military dog tags, but something more. There's no confusion, gentlemen. I'm Commander Sarah Williams, Deep Sea Rescue Operations, Naval Special Warfare Command. I've been conducting observational research at Norfolk Station for the past 2 weeks. She gestured toward her volunteer clothing. This assignment was designed to evaluate base operational readiness and personnel response to crisis situations without the complications that arise from my presence in uniform. The implications hit the officers like a physical blow. For 2 weeks, all their conversations, casual attitudes, and crisis response procedures had been observed by one of the most specialized officers in submarine rescue service. Thompson leaned forward. "Commander, what exactly have you observed? Concerning patterns in crisis response, decision-making under pressure, and unfortunately, attitudes toward personnel based on appearance rather than capability." Sarah pulled out a small notebook. "I've documented 15 instances of assumptions about competence based on age, gender, or civilian status rather than actual qualifications." Sarah moved away from the coffee station, her bearing now unmistakably military despite the civilian clothes. "My specialization in submarine rescue began 5 years ago after USS Hartford experienced critical flooding during training exercises. 12 sailors trapped at 350 feet, hull breach threatening total loss." She sat across from the officers, no longer the humble volunteer they'd dismissed. "That rescue operation lasted 14 hours. Every decision meant potential life or death for 12 men. We brought them all home." Morrison found his voice. "Ma'am, I apologize. I had no way of knowing—" "Colonel, you're correct that you couldn't know my specialization, but every assumption you made was based on prejudice rather than evidence." Sarah's voice carried calm authority. "You saw a young woman and immediately concluded she couldn't understand military operations." Thompson asked carefully. "Commander, what about USS Springfield and USS Alexandria?" Sarah's expression grew more serious. "Springfield was more complex. Pacific operation, submarine lodged at 450 feet against underwater cliff face. 23 crew members, hull integrity compromised, oxygen systems failing. That rescue took 18 hours and required techniques that hadn't been attempted before. We developed new approach protocols, modified decompression procedures, and coordinated with 3 support vessels." She paused, remembering. "Alexandria was the worst. Mediterranean crisis, submarine struck underwater mine during patrol. 47 crew members, multiple hull breaches, emergency ascent impossible due to structural damage. We spent 22 hours underwater, working in shifts to repair life support systems while coordinating surface rescue operations. Lost communication with the surface for 6 hours. Had to make decisions based purely on submarine engineering knowledge and emergency medicine." Morrison looked pale. "All crew survived?" "All crew survived, but it required techniques that are now standard protocol for deepwater submarine emergency rescue operations." Sarah looked around the table. "Those 3 operations taught me that submarine rescue success depends on expertise, precise technical knowledge, and ability to make critical decisions under extreme pressure. What they didn't teach me was how to handle being dismissed as incompetent based on appearance before anyone evaluated actual capabilities." Rodriguez asked quietly. "Commander, what happens now? With USS Montana?" "Now I do my job." Sarah stood, military bearing fully evident. 90 minutes to save 120 lives. Every minute we spend discussing prejudice and assumptions is time those sailors don't have." She looked directly at Morrison. "Colonel, your attitudes about women in military service and civilian capabilities are your issue to resolve. Right now, my focus is on bringing home 120 American sailors. The sound of helicopter rotors could be heard approaching the base." Sarah walked toward the cafeteria exit, then paused and turned back to face the 4 officers still frozen in shocked silence. "Gentlemen, before I coordinate this rescue operation, let me clarify something about submarine rescue service." She approached Morrison directly, her civilian clothes somehow failing to diminish the command presence radiating from her frame. "Colonel, you made several statements about young women, combat experience, and military capability. USS Montana has 120 sailors whose lives depend on those statements being completely wrong." Morrison nodded numbly, still processing the complete reversal of everything he'd assumed. The 3 submarine rescues I've coordinated weren't textbook operations. Hartford required descending in experimental rescue vehicle with untested pressure protocols. Springfield demanded modifying emergency ascent procedures while underwater with failing life support. Alexandria involved physical repair of submarine hull while coordinated surface rescue. Thompson leaned forward. Commander, what does that kind of experience actually involve? 14-hour shifts in deep submergence vehicles smaller than phone booths, making life and death decisions based on sonar readings and pressure calculations, while knowing one mistake kills everyone. Coordinating with surface vessels while maintaining constant communication with trapped crew members who are running out of oxygen? Sarah's voice grew more intense. It means understanding submarine structural engineering well enough to determine whether hull breaches can support emergency ascent. It means emergency medicine training to treat decompression sickness, pressure injuries, and psychological trauma from extended underwater entrapment. She pulled the chain from beneath her shirt. Not dog tags, but a small worn medal, the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal with V device for valor in combat. This medal represents USS Alexandria Rescue Operation. 22 hours underwater, coordinating rescue of 47 sailors while surface vessels lost contact and assumed we were all dead. Morrison stared at the medal. Ma'am, I never intended... Colonel, intentions don't matter when they prevent effective crisis response. Sarah replaced the medal beneath her shirt. Your assumptions about gender, age, and capability could have delayed submarine rescue coordination by critical minutes. The helicopter sound grew louder, landing on the base helipad. Commander Williams, Captain Rodriguez said carefully, what happens after USS Montana? After Montana, I return to my research assignment. Norfolk Station becomes part of comprehensive study on operational readiness, crisis response, and personnel evaluation procedures. Sarah moved toward the exit, then stopped again. This incident will become case study in naval leadership development. Not because Colonel Morrison failed to recognize a rescue specialist, but because he failed to evaluate capabilities based on evidence rather than prejudice. Thompson raised his hand. Commander, what recommendations will you make? Norfolk Station will implement new protocols for crisis response, specialist identification, and inclusion of all qualified personnel regardless of appearance or assumed status. Sarah checked her watch. More importantly, naval rescue operations will establish new training requirements for recognizing and utilizing expertise regardless of packaging. She looked around the cafeteria, where dozen personnel had witnessed the entire encounter. Everyone here learned something about assumptions, capability, and the danger of judging competence based on superficial characteristics. In submarine rescue, we don't have luxury of prejudice. When sailors are trapped at 400 feet with failing oxygen, the only thing that matters is expertise and proven ability to bring them home alive. The helicopter rotors reached full speed outside. Colonel Morrison, you'll report to Admiral Richardson's office after this rescue operation concludes. Your comments about women in military service and civilian capabilities indicate need for comprehensive leadership development and bias recognition training. Morrison nodded, understanding his career trajectory had just changed permanently. Gentlemen, USS Montana has 87 minutes of oxygen remaining. I have work to do. Sarah Williams walked out of the cafeteria, leaving 4 officers to contemplate how a simple coffee break had fundamentally challenged everything they thought they knew about capability, expertise, and hidden strength. 6 hours later, USS Montana surfaced in the Atlantic under emergency power, all 120 sailors safe aboard. The rescue operation had required every technique Sarah Williams had developed during her previous 3 submarine emergencies, plus innovations that would become standard protocol for deep-water rescue operations. Commander Williams coordinated the operation from Deep Submergence Rescue Vehicle Mystic, descending 400 feet to manually guide emergency ascent procedures while maintaining constant communication with trapped crew and surface vessels. The technical precision required to extract a damaged submarine from continental shelf positioning at 40-degree angle while managing pressure differentials and potential decompression injuries demonstrated exactly why submarine rescue specialists required years of specialized training and field experience. But the most significant impact wasn't technical. 3 months later, the commander in the cafeteria had become naval folklore throughout the fleet. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison received transfer to administrative duties at Quantico, effectively ending any possibility of operational command. His evaluation included mandatory bias recognition training and supervision requirements for all future assignments. The incident sparked immediate changes at Norfolk Station and throughout naval operations worldwide. Captain Rodriguez and Commander Thompson received additional leadership development, specifically focused on moral courage required to speak up when witnessing inappropriate treatment and the importance of evaluating personnel based on capability rather than appearance. Sarah Williams was promoted to full commander ahead of schedule and appointed to head the new Naval Special Operations Inclusion Initiative, designed to ensure military effectiveness through recognition of talent regardless of packaging. Most importantly, the Norfolk Station incident became centerpiece of Navy-wide leadership program called Hidden Expertise. The program focused on teaching officers to identify capability regardless of apparent status, understanding that naval effectiveness depended on seeing beyond surface assumptions. Leadership requires humility to recognize that expertise can exist in unexpected forms, Commander Williams explained to a naval leadership conference. It requires courage to question your own assumptions about the worth and capability of every person around you. The volunteer program at Norfolk Station expanded to include retired engineers, former submarine service members, and civilian technical specialists whose expertise enhanced base operations in ways traditional military structure sometimes couldn't address. But the most significant change was cultural. The incident created Navy-wide conversations about respect, assumption, and hidden potential in every person wearing uniform or working alongside military personnel. Norfolk Station's cafeteria installed a small plaque near the coffee station. Military effectiveness is measured not by how you treat those with obvious authority, but by how you recognize and develop capability wherever you find it. Every morning, service members and civilians sharing coffee were reminded that everyone around them carried experiences, expertise, and capabilities that couldn't be judged by uniform, rank, age, gender, or first impression. Sometimes the person serving coffee had coordinated international submarine rescue operations. Sometimes the quiet volunteer had technical expertise that could save hundreds of lives. Sometimes the most qualified specialist in the room was the one everyone had underestimated. USS Montana's crew sent Sarah Williams a custom plaque. To Commander Williams, whose expertise brought 120 sailors home safe. Thank you for proving that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear volunteer badges. The plaque sits in her office at Naval Special Warfare Command, alongside commendations from USS Hartford, USS Springfield, and USS Alexandria rescue operations. But Sarah Williams still volunteers at military base cafeterias during research assignments, observing how leadership develops when people think no one qualified is watching. To everyone who typed respect and shared where you're watching from, thank you for standing with our heroes. Subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next one.